I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. And I'm pleased today to be joined by a friend and colleague, a person that I just admire for the kind of work he does and the leadership he is providing to our community and to the world through his interest in books and in reading and in literature. My guest is Troy Johnson. He's the head of it's called AALBC, African American Literature Book Club. And, I want to talk about all things books, all things literature, all things reading. Troy, brother, good to see you. Welcome back. What's new?
Thanks again for inviting me, Alice. Always a pleasure to be here. What's new? There's so much new going on. Technology has always been an issue. I through the African American Literature Book Club celebrate Black culture through books, and I do that primarily on the web. And the site it'll be 26 years old this year, and it has changed radically over the years simply because the web has changed. But one of the things that has changed most drastically is the introduction of artificial intelligence, and AI is really poised to change the way we discover information, discover books. It is just probably the most substantial change that I've seen in the last 25 years, and that includes, Google's search engine and Amazon and I probably put the cell phone, the smartphone as the number two thing, but what we're seeing with AI is just unprecedented and, just amazing. But that informs how I share information about books. I actually use, and I know we talked about books, but, technology is a big part of what I do. And, building websites and expanding that, AI has become an integral part of that.
Sure.
I can give it some instructions and it can write code for me. I can give it a prompt and it will generate a bio for me. And, I can see perhaps one day where someone can go to a browser, give it a prompt, and it will dynamically generate pretty much anything that I can write, on the fly.
Just like that.
Yeah. So how do I evolve the site in an environment like that will be the challenge. But one thing that AI could probably do it, but one thing that AI can't do really is what we're doing here, have a conversation. Now, I say that with a caveat because technically it will be able to do that convincingly. You can have it write a script and, take some video clips from us and create characters doing what we're doing now.
Right.
And, it will become largely indistinguishable from the real thing.
That's amazing. I want to keep digging into that, but first let's go through your website.
Sure.
We pulled up your webpage, the largest site celebrating books by Black writers since 1998. Walk us through the site and what your vision was in creating this in 1990s, right? And tell us how it has evolved.
Wow. All right. So
what new missions emerged out of experience?
Yeah, all right. So I will point out one thing that you probably don't expect me to point out, but the website, its business model is advertising. And so I can see that you're using an ad blocker because I don't see any of my advertising.
Okay.
So, that's something that consumers should be aware of, but it's something that I have to address because ads take away from the user experience if they're not carefully crafted and displayed. So that's one of the things that I'm working on with this website.
So if I wanted to see this with the ads, what do I do? Maybe if our producer pulled this up, I'd love to show the ads as well.
Yeah, you could turn off your ad blocker. It depends on how the ads are being blocked. But let's just talk about the website.
Okay, sure.
Not complicate things. So here, you asked about my motivation.
Hmm.
In the mid 90s, I used to build websites for other people. And, one of my clients and liked her site, but she wasn't making any money. And I decided to build a website to make money. And I picked books. It seemed like a simple thing. And there were affiliate programs that one could sign up for. So I signed up for the Barnes and Noble affiliate program. You put a book on a web page, the visitor will click the book, be sent to Barnes and Noble, and you would earn a commission.
How much would you earn, for example, back
Oh,
then?
ooh. With Barnes and Noble, I don't recall because a few years after I started using Barnes and Noble, I went to Amazon.
Hmm.
And at the time, Amazon was paying about 8%.
Hmm.
It was a range between 7 and 10%.
Okay.
And, so that, and I'm sure Barnes and Noble was on par with that.
Sure.
So it was about 10% of the retail price of the book.
Hmm.
But when I created the site, then I realized there was so much information out there. There was history I was unaware of. There was, literature I was unaware of. I tell people I grew up in Harlem, but I was largely unaware of the Harlem Renaissance. And I just I was just overwhelmed with the variety of content that was out there. And I can looking at you scrolling. Those are some of the ads that are on the site now, but I'm not sure why they're shifting
Okay.
the content that way.
Okay.
But yeah, I just I was just amazed by what was out there and what I didn't know, and it became my mission to really share that with others.
Hmm.
And so I quickly, this site became my passion. I stopped building websites for other people. And, this is what I continue to do. So as you scroll through the page, you'll see information about new books. So this is a list of books that are coming out across genres, nonfiction, fiction, children's books. And then I go into more detail. So you can go and click through and you'll see, every book that I'm aware of and it's a curated list. So I don't have every single book that's coming out.
Hmm.
The only person that might have that would be Amazon. But what I do that the Amazon doesn't do is that, yes, this list is curated. So you're going to find, what we think. And when I say we, me and people I work with, the best of what's coming out. So you'll find a list of upcoming books that we think are important.
Hmm.
And you'll find here are profiles of authors that we think are important. Some of them are famous. Some of them are, in this case, looking at this list, at least half of these are independently published authors. The brother on the upper left-hand side, D. Amari Jackson, is an author I've published. He most recently wrote a middle grade children's book called Jelani's Key. It's a book that you're just not, mainstream publishers aren't really releasing. It's a coming of age story. Two young boys learn about African history as part of a rites of passage program. And again, it's just some subject matter that mainstream publishers aren't going to cover. So as part of selling books and letting people know about books, I recently began publishing books. As you go down, you'll see their book reviews. And, one of the challenges and one of the main changes I've seen in the media landscape over the last 2 decades has been really a reduction in the number of platforms, print, online, any type of media that are covering Black books in a critical way. You'll find, influencers on social media who, will just tout anything they're paid to tout. But, in terms of critical reviews of books, you're not going to find very many platforms that are doing that. And so, our site tries to make a contribution to that. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why, I make it a point to support, at least a couple of Black-owned newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
Those platforms are extremely important to support, not just for local coverage, but for coverage of books.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the books that we review, you're just not going to find them widely reviewed, and some of them are by major publishers. We got Unsettled by Ayanna Mathis. She's a very prominent author,
Mm-hmm.
but how many people are publishing reviews of her book where it's going to be seen? Jesmyn Ward is fantastically popular, but she's may not, and Ayanna and Jesmyn aren't widely known.
Mm-hmm.
Jesmyn may be one of the most critically acclaimed writers we have writing today.
Wow.
She's not a household name.
I'm not familiar with her.
You are familiar?
I'm not.
Okay, yeah. She's written many critically acclaimed books.
Mm-hmm.
She's a 2-time National Book Award winner.
Okay.
The National Book Awards is like the Academy Awards of Publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And she holds the distinction of, she may be the only one. They're not, this is 100-year-old an award, and she may be one of less than a handful of writers who've won it twice.
Mm.
And when I said 100, it probably is about 85 years old.
Sure.
So it's been around a long time. And, actually for many years, there were no Black winners. Richard Wright was the first writer to win the award. And then there was another few decades before another writer won. And so it's important that, in fact, I share all of the Black writers who have won the National Book Award on the site.
Okay, awesome.
But, you can see, like this book of photography by Charlie Palmer. It's not a book of photography. It's actually an expansion on that book that W.E.B. Du Bois published. And the name of the book, that the Brownies book, was something that W.E.B. Du Bois published about 100 years ago. And Charlie Palmer has come in and revamped it with fantastic photography. And again, this is another book that, unless you're going into a Black-owned bookstore, you're probably not going to discover it. And, many of us don't live near Black-owned bookstores. In fact, for that reason, I published a list of Black-owned bookstores so that readers can, if they visit a city, they can check out the store and discover books they might not otherwise. Mm-hmm. Again, as you scroll down, I have a list of book festivals and events. Again, these events are critical and crucial because they are some of the few times where you can discover and meet and hear our authors. So this list is a list. They're not just Black events. They're pretty much all of the events that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. So this list is maintained. And
do you go to the events? Do you go to the festivals?
Yeah, I make it a point of trying. Mm-hmm. I can't, there are too many for me to visit. Many of them are international. But as with the bookstores, I make every effort to visit as many as I can. Mm-hmm. And when I do visit them, I cover them. I shoot video and interview people and take photographs and do all kinds of things to share that information. Mm-hmm. So like the Bocas Lit Fest that I have up there, I've never been to that one. The African American Children's Book Festival, which is the green logo with the two little silhouettes of the children there. Mm-hmm. That's an event that's coming up the first weekend of May in Philadelphia. It is I was going to qualify by saying arguably, but it is the best Black children's book festival, wow, perhaps on earth. And I say that because you're going to find many of the most celebrated authors and illustrators at that event. And it takes place once a year. And the really good thing about that event is, yes, they have, for example, they're going to have Vashti Harrison, who I mentioned in the newsletter just went out this afternoon. Vashti Harrison is the first Black woman to win a Caldecott Medal. And that award is bestowed by the American Library Association and is one of the top children's book awards that is given. And she, again, in the life of this award was started in 1938. So she is the first Black woman to ever win it. And she will be at the African American Children's Book Festival in Philadelphia Saturday, February 2nd. But the woman that runs that, she is also highlights and supports indie authors. So, there's a number of, indie authors who, again, she curates this event, and, you're going to find top writers and illustrators, but you're going to also find emerging writers and illustrators. And I was fortunate enough to have our author, Diamari Jackson, be present. So I'll be at that event.
I think I've only been to one kind of book festival that I can recall in my life, and somehow it was in Washington, D.C. I think it was Washington, D.C., or it was either Washington or Baltimore, and it was an outdoor event. I can't remember which it was. I think it might have been Baltimore.
All right. So, yeah.
Do you know if there's a big book festival in Baltimore?
Yeah, in Baltimore. I want to, on my website, you can find out. Yeah. But off the top of my head, I want to say there's a Baltimore book festival. In DC, certainly there's the National Book Festival. It's sponsored by, I want to say, this Smithsonian. There used to be the Capitol Book Festival. Yeah, let's take a look. So if you filter on location.
Well, while we're looking, I just remember how good it felt to be around a gazillion books and hundreds of authors. And there's a feeling that's real that you experience. It's a good feeling, and it gives you a sense of both possibility, a sense of pride, a sense of being, and you are happy to purchase as much as you can afford to, or as much as you can carry, because you feel you're doing the right thing when you are around this creative output, this these activities. So, and I wish there was a festival here in Minnesota. There hasn't been, to my knowledge, but there should be one. But the question then is, what's happening around the world? You mentioned Philadelphia. It's the biggest in the world for children's books. What is the world like for Black literature now? Not only in this country, but Europe, and particularly the Caribbean, South America, and Africa. Do you have a pulse, your finger on the pulse of book creativity, publishing creativity around the world, the diaspora in particular?
Having my pulse on the global impact, what's happening globally, I would say I have a sense. So you can kind of divine what I'm familiar with through the website. So there are a list of events that take place all over the country, all over the world, that are listed here. There's a really growing community of Black book festivals in London, for example. But every major city has some type of book festival. But London sticks out in my mind. The Caribbean, many of the countries have book festivals. I've attended some in Jamaica. There's I believe it's called the Kingston Book Festival. There's one in there used to be one in Antigua called the Antigua Barbuda Literary Festival. Some of them come and go. There's really one terrific festival that I've yet to attend. And again, if you looked at the list, it would jog my memories. There's Bocas. There's another one in Jamaica. Again, there are a lot happening all over the world. There's several in Africa that I'm aware of, in various countries in Africa.
Well, I just saw one that was scroll back, Cooper, if you would. It said Emirates Air Book Festival. What does that mean? How does that work? What is that about? Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I've other than knowing that it exists,
Hmm.
that's, I've added it to the list. So I'm
Hmm.
not really familiar with that particular one. Um, but there was one recently that took place in Palestine, the Palestine Literary Festival or Book Festival. It may be on this list, but it happened right before. It took place right before, you know, they bombed Israel, and
Yeah.
and this conflict set off. But the interesting thing about that is Ta-Nehisi Coates attended it,
Hmm.
and he was given a tour of Palestine, and he came away with a completely different impression of of that area in the region and how they've been oppressed.
Mm.
So these festivals are important for these reasons. When you have someone who actually is on the ground and visits an area and gets a sense of what's really happening,
Hmm.
it informs us globally, and so that's really important. And there are black-owned bookstores all over the world, and again, I published a list so that people can try to visit them when they travel abroad. Some of the oldest black-owned bookstores. There's one in London, and no, in France. Sorry, and you'll find it on the list of black-owned bookstores. But what makes these stores important is that they were the hub of consciousness. They were focal points for people who were fighting oppression, who were fighting for the rights of black people, not just in their local communities but globally. So these these stores were crucial.
So,
And
so did you know? I think I forgot the name of it, but Michelle's bookstore in Harlem,
I
125th
yep.
or
Again,
127th. Which one?
yeah, I know it from reputation.
Uh-huh.
And I grew up in Harlem, and
Hmm.
I was there living in Harlem when it was open, but
Hmm.
unfortunately, I never visited it.
Hmm.
It was again, growing up in Harlem. Our educate, and this is another subject, but you know, it may be news to people, but Harlem or New York in general was probably far more segregated than the South. So I
Hmm.
have family in Louisiana and North Carolina, and the kids attended school with white kids. I didn't attend school with a white kid until I was in high school,
Hmm.
and that was largely because I went to a magnet school. It was a
Hmm.
specialized high school.
Hmm.
If I went to my zone high school, I could have gone through my entire education and not be with any other group than black people.
Hmm.
Um, and then, but that is not necessarily bad.
Right.
But what made it worse is that none of the teachers were black.
Ah.
So I did not have a black teacher until I was in college, and
So
I
did it
was
feel like in retrospect a colonial experience?
mm, yeah. What it was is that the teachers just simply didn't know.
Mm.
If I was in an English class, for example, and I was teaching students about history and literature, I certainly would have informed them about Michelle's bookstore,
Hmm.
and there were others in Harlem. And I
Hmm.
certainly would have told them about the Harlem Renaissance and the Black Arts movement, which was basically still active when I was in the '60s in school. But so I didn't learn any of that till I was older.
Hmm.
And so you may have had well-intentioned teachers, but they weren't from the community.
Hmm.
They didn't know anything or very little about the culture,
Hmm.
and they're educating black kids. And so again, I can go through my entire education in Harlem and not know about the Harlem Renaissance. So our education, is informed by what you described as what colonialism.
Colonial, yes, settlers. I remember I was a student at Morehouse in 1965, and on one of the breaks, hitchhiked from Atlanta to New York.
Really?
And I remember that was crazy to be doing that at that time, but I did. I was adventurous, 17 years old, maybe
Wow.
18, and remember being in Harlem and somehow getting a chance to hang out at I think it was Louis Michel was the name, Louis Michel's bookstore, and actually talking to him. I think I just stood at the counter
Wow.
and he was just talking and looking at books. I can't remember what he said, but I had the feeling this was a rare thing for me. Al, hitchhiking from Atlanta to New York, Al from Minnesota, now living in Atlanta and now hitchhiking to New York, being there. And I just remember at one point in time, some cat comes in, kind of obviously in a situation, maybe I would say drugs, and without missing a beat, he kept talking to me, looked at the guy, acknowledged the guy, and gave him $3 or $4.
Wow.
And the guy just shook his head and walked out the door. And he didn't, it was like nothing. It didn't break our conversation at all. You know, it was like, I can't describe how the feeling of the moment was, but there was no fear. There was no fear, no intimidation. There was compassion.
Sure.
You know, and there was fluidity in how he maintained the conversation with me and around me about literature and about books and about Harlem. So it was just a great experience. But that was one of my, bookstore stories and experiences. And I'm fortunate now to say that I was there and had the chance to be in the presence of that pioneer. Because that family, I think, was he the filmmaker too? Or his brother?
No, I think.
Or the same family? I don't know.
I don't know. The name is obviously the same, but
Yeah.
I don't know that detail.
Okay.
But I do know that he was an iconic bookseller. And the store was an institution. And there was another store that was open at the same time and remained open until I want to say the 90s, and it was Liberation Bookstore, which was also in Harlem. And I did have the fortune of visiting that store, but these are what I describe as old school stores. They were there to make money, but they were more mission driven. You know, they were more about educating people and supporting the community. And, that's become increasingly rare. And, in fact, Harlem proper doesn't have a Black-owned bookstore any longer, which is, in my mind is unthinkable about, when you think about, the heart of, or, arguably the center or the capital of Black America, Harlem, and doesn't have an independent Black-owned bookstore.
The question is Harlem Black anymore?
Well, increasingly, it's becoming less and less Black. It's and there's class distinctions that are becoming quite stark. And again, I no longer live in Harlem. I can't afford to live in Harlem any longer. Technically it's my home, but I can't afford to live there. And it's and that's a story that's told over and over and over again.
Sure.
And, it's the city, like many other cities, have become increasingly more expensive to live in. Even the community I moved here in Tampa, Florida, is much more expensive than it was a decade ago. It just, folks are being squeezed, and that affects, how many, the number of stores that we have. That affects our media platforms. That affects websites. I mean, just there aren't as many Black websites dedicated to Black books as there was when I started. One would think there would be more. One would think we would be thriving. But no, there's fewer. The few that remain struggle. And it's largely because, the web is really just dominated by a handful of sites. And those sites have algorithms that are designed by the brightest minds in the world to keep you engaged, and are actively working, every additional microsecond they keep you engaged on the site is money. And those sites don't serve us.
And that's a second that you're not somewhere else. If you're with them.
No, that's the absolute goal, to keep you locked in,
Mm-hmm.
by any means necessary. And if it
Mm-hmm.
means hacking into your brain and making you do things that you wouldn't otherwise do, or things that are actually not in your self-interest,
Mm-hmm.
no problem. Let's go. Let's do it.
That's
And,
amazing. I'm going to come back to that because I want to have you think about this. Just the big news, not big news, but the whole idea of Cat Williams breaking the internet. They said, I don't know if you followed that with his interview with Shannon.
Sharp, I think. Yeah.
Shannon Sharp, yeah. But let me come back to that. Let me ask you: have you traveled out of the country? And what's your experience in the global arena?
Yeah, I like to travel, and I've traveled around I'm one of those guys who've been to every single state,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been to a number of foreign countries. The last place I was in Ghana for a month, but I've been to Kenya, and I was supposed to go to Egypt, this year, but that's not going to happen for obvious reasons. But yeah, I do try to get around. I'm going to I'm going to South America for the first time at the end of this month or next. End of this month.
Okay.
This month, actually. No, end of February. Sorry, end of February.
Sure. Sure. And I asked the question to see how that figures into your thinking, your sense of both identity and history, and your sense of the future. Because beneath this conversation, we're talking about how technology is modifying how we relate to each other and to the world, and what freeing is there possible, which at the same time, what what's the opposite of freeing? It's what you described in what the intention of the 4 or 5 super websites do, and that is they lock you. You voluntarily submit yourself to a type of regime. You could call that enslavement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or supplication. And so, how does your travel around the world allow you to look at, analyze, and feel about where we are, Africans in America, African Americans, Africans on the planet Earth, or ultimately Africans on planet Africa?
Yeah, the that's a deep question. I can answer it on a number of levels. I'll start. Personally, one of the things that I've observed is it's difficult to understand another country without going there,
Mm-hmm.
because what you discover online in particular, and which is where most of us discover things and learn things, is from some website typically. And you can come away, you and I can go online, research something, and come away with 2 completely different worldviews.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard the concept of filter bubbles and silos of information. And again, the algorithm is not necessarily trying to feed you the truth, it's trying to feed you the thing that's going to keep you most engaged. And as a result, you can go to YouTube and do a search for a video, and the video result is not a function of the correct answer or the best answer, is a function of what's going to keep you engaged. And then by default, they automatically send you another video and another video. They pre-play, again, to keep you engaged. But depending on your prior history and what they know about you, they'll feed you a stream of videos that are going to, that are optimized or have been selected, that are going to keep you, most likely to keep you engaged. And now those videos are going to be different than the ones they'll serve you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, over time, you're just being fed completely different information. So it's difficult to really understand any other culture without really visiting that culture. And even then, it can be a challenge. But no, it's it's become, we have access to more information than ever before, but
Yeah.
we are often woefully misinformed. And it's not our fault. You almost, there was an old saying that when, people would say, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, something like that.
Yeah.
It's become even more important on the web. You can't really believe everything you see, right? Everything you see on the web. You have to really aggressively
Well,
really plow through what you're
sure.
consuming.
Well, it's like one of the good things is the sense that what we relied on in libraries now is accessible at a multifold level because the entire planet and the world's knowledge is basically accessible in ways that it has not been for us in the past. But the question is, the ticket in is a ticket that gives you a guided tour, right? And
Right.
it's the guiding that you have to watch out for. And you might
Exactly.
not get what you're looking for, but you will get something.
You will get something. I mean, I had a conversation with a couple of people who were thoroughly convinced that the world was flat.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was a subject of manipulation and programming to believe otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no shortage of information on the web to prove to people that the world is indeed flat.
Mm-hmm.
And, but that's what I mean. So so that's just one anecdote, but
Mm-hmm.
again, more access to more information, but in many ways less informed.
Mm-hmm.
And this presents in a wide variety of ways. It presents in support for candidates like the former President Trump,
Mm-hmm.
and having all of this information about him doesn't impact doesn't impact many people's impression of him. He can do nothing wrong, and he could boast about doing wrong
He can
things,
do all the wrong he wants to, and it's okay.
and
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah.
Why is that okay? There's something fundamentally broken, and it's again, you can go on the web and get nothing but glowing and positive information about Donald Trump, and you go on another path on the web and hear all negative anti-Trump things, and both the negative and positive aren't true. It's just the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, but
Mm-hmm.
because of the way the web is designed, it's hard to get the information you want. Mark Zuckerberg, touted Facebook as being a platform to connect everyone, to make the world, bring the world closer together, and that isn't happening. And it's Facebook has done a lot of things that are quite negative. It's helped inflame riots. It helped bring the rise of Trump, because
Mm-hmm.
they allowed bad actors to come in and push positive Trump information and push negative Hillary information. And there were a class of people who were never going to vote for Trump, but were so disenchanted with Hillary Clinton for things like Pizzagate,
Mm-hmm.
and all right, I'm not going to vote for Hillary, and which only helped.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, mission accomplished. It was super effective, and Facebook was one of the platforms that were instrumental in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the idea of bringing the world closer together, that's propaganda. It's what they tell us to make us think that this platform is all harmonious and positive and altruistic and just trying to do the right thing. Any positive that comes out of Facebook is purely incidental.
Hmm.
The bottom line is we're trying to make as much money as possible. And in order to do that, we need to know as much about you as it is possible. And they do. I mean, for many of us, Facebook knows more about you than you know about yourself.
Mm.
and they exploit that knowledge, and they allow to do so with reckless abandon. The web is like the wild wild west, and Facebook is one of the biggest guns out there, and they exploit that advantage and take advantage of it. And to even talk about this in the way that I'm talking to some people sounds like, nah, I just use it to talk to my friends and family, and I don't buy into all of that. But it's difficult for people to appreciate how they're being manipulated, because the engine is designed not to make you feel as though you're being
Right.
manipulated. But
You're
it's one of the reasons why.
you're thinking you're exercising your choice.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you're
and
being
that's the point.
spoon-fed. Yeah.
They've been brilliant at doing that.
Mhm.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Well,
Amazon has been brilliant.
let me come back to that, because we're going to get around to talking more about AI. Let me ask you about you said what countries did you have the best experiences in? I spent time in Ghana, interested in your experience and impressions in Ghana.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, when you visit a place where, it's all Black, and, Black people are on the money, it's, I just find it that to be terrific. I visited Ghana twice, a month each time. The first time was in 2000, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me at that time was, when you go downtown Lagos, and you go into the office buildings, and, it could be
Downtown Accra.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking Nigeria.
Yeah.
Sorry. Where I visited as well. And in fact, this story is really more about Nigeria
Okay. Yeah.
than Ghana.
Sure.
So in Lagos,
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity to visit. My buddy was in financial services, and I got to visit the offices, and so the temperatures in the mid 90s and the humidity's in the upper 90s, and people are wearing 3-piece suits,
Mm-hmm.
and the women have straight wigs, and you go into stores and there's lightning cream, and I was a little disappointed to see the impact of European culture without the European gaze, like the direct European gaze.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really surprising. I didn't see that so much in Ghana. There's some of it, but much less of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you will find people in wearing traditional dress. I was in Ghana just in 2022, and I had the privilege of meeting, a tribal leader, and also the mayor of Accra,
Mm-hmm.
a woman, and she dressed in traditional attire,
Mm-hmm.
and so I appreciated that, and it was a Black experience. A Black experience is very different across the diaspora and in Africa, and even across the various nations in Africa. But this struck me as a purely Black experience, and that's something that we really don't get. Even the culture is different, and how we Americans operate is different than the way people operate in African cultures. The other thing that struck me, and this I found this true in Ghana as well, was the influence of Christianity and religion. Super powerful there. More so than it's almost like there were almost like fundamental Christianity. You found that in Africa. There was obviously some diversity in what people believed, but the influence of religion, Christianity and Islam, was pretty strong. And then you could so that was one impression. But the other thing was the influence of the Chinese on infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
and that will be quite telling, in the future, as there's a book by Walter Rodney that talks about the title was How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, or similar to that. But when we talk about how European countries came in and divided up the nation, and with no regard for the cultures and the people who live there, which set up problems in the future. But how they designed the infrastructure to extract wealth out of the nation. So it's difficult to travel around to different countries, but it's very easy to get to the coast, and and now with a lot of the African nations, particularly the ones that were colonized by the French, who've gotten independence and now are really trying to get true independence from France and taking control of the monetary system. And, it's setting up, some people suggest France will be a third world country were it not for Africa.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see how that plays out. And it's, but there's so much information about that and how Africa has gotten to where it is today. And that we just, I'm still learning more. And there's just so much that we don't know. And, again, part of my motivation behind the website is, we in school, they start civilization with the Greek, but the Greeks themselves tell you they learn from Africans, but that's not really taught. And so it's like, so again, this is part of what motivates me. And, at some point, I always felt that, there needed to be, Africans in Africa and throughout the entire diaspora need to unify on some level. That's something that Europeans don't want to see, have done everything to stop. Whether they were Americans touting that, like Stokely Carmichael, or was Africans touting that idea, they were systematically eliminated. They were killed. They, whether it's, so, it's almost as if you look at the most violent reaction to people, particularly Americans, but obviously in Africa, those are the ones that were probably doing the right things. If you see someone who is under no threat, they're probably not working on our behalf. So if you think about all of the people who've been assassinated, from Medgar Evers to Dr. King to
Malcolm, everybody.
These are men. Obviously there were women involved, but these men who were murdered were on the right track.
Sure. Well, let me bring this back around to literature. And what's your assessment? I love the idea of Afrofuturism and its presence and emergence in the body of literature globally. How can you describe that? What it is, kind of what the parameters are, and what it purports to do as a tool for building out futures that have us in the future, and that as opposed to futures where we are excluded or eliminated, which is a real possibility. I mean, if we don't pay attention, I tell people, Europeans love Africa, they just don't like the Africans.
Sure.
And so you say, oh, Al, isn't that harsh? I said, no, because they loved North America. And guess what happened?
Yeah.
Right? So
right.
those millions of people that were here
right.
are gone. They're no more. And so that could happen elsewhere, and it will unless we pay attention. So what is Afrofuturism? How does it show up in literature, and what does it mean?
All right. So I'm not an Afrofuturism scholar, but I will say this. I do not. So one of the things you learn when you travel is that there are a lot of, we think of ourselves as minorities, but globally, we're not minorities at all. Europeans are minorities. And, if you look at the numbers, even in the United States alone, their numbers will continue to go down. So the future are brown people. The future aren't Europeans, and they know this. And they're fighting tooth and nail to maintain that. But it's just, the numbers speak for themselves. That said, historically the science fiction, just simply didn't include Black people.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Richard Pryor tells a joke famously about that. But if you look at, so Afrofuturism ensures that Black people are part of the future. If you're a Star Trek fan, there was one of the series. I don't know the name of it, but one of the series, the captain was a Black woman. The president of the Earth was a Black woman, played by Stacey Abrams, who's actually writes under the pseudonym Selena Montgomery, so she's a novelist. But Stacey Abrams played the general that ran the military operations for the Earth, was a Black woman. Black, so this, many people reacted, oh, this, come on, they've gone too far. This is ridiculous. How can you have Black women doing all of this? But no one said that when there's always white men doing all of that.
Right.
And so the likelihood is that it could very well be Black women running the Earth. And, because that's just the way the demographics are going to shift. That's perhaps part of the reason that the pushback against the border is so strident. People don't want non-Europeans to come into this country and to spoil it. They want to make America great again. Really, which is, we want to make America, it's just code for saying we want to make America white again. Now, I'm not trying to say that, there shouldn't be any white people, but at the same time, it's got to be room for everyone. It's got to be fair. It's got to be balanced. This, and if, in fact, it's, I think race is in many ways is a distraction. It's really about class and wealth and
power.
Yeah. And, just the greedy folks at the top who want as much wealth as they can accumulate, and they don't care about anyone else, including other white people. So, race is, just something to distract the ones who aren't wealthy, aren't the white unwealthy, and to give them something to, target their anger against, when really, Black people aren't the enemy.
Is it too simplistic to say that's a reflection of the notion in the system of patriarchy in the West versus, if you say patriarchy, you have to also think of matriarchy, right, as a counter balance to it. How does that come into play in your mind as you think about it? And
the country was founded by wealthy white men for wealthy white men. Full stop. Black people, Black men got the right to vote before white women got the vote. Everything that, this country was birthed, was born that way. And all of our institutions and systems come from that. And we've spent the last 100 years trying to undo that. And it's really, really difficult because, we live in a country where you have to, it's a fight to tear down the monuments to traitors, and, like, you don't have that conversation in Germany, there's no one fighting to keep, statues of Hitler up, so, literally traitors to this country, people who fought to be here in Florida. And if you don't celebrate them, then you're anti-American. You're trying to distort history. You're trying to rewrite history. You're trying to elevate, we live in a country where someone running for president can say that enslaved Africans learned job skills. They were
on the job training.
Yeah.
OJT, yeah.
We helped them by bringing them here and enslaving them for generations.
I remember watching or listening to was a WPA project where they recorded people that had been enslaved. They tried to, I think one of the Lomax men was involved in this one, where he was interviewing an elder out of his family and he asked him, you know, what kind of job did you have when you were enslaved? And the elder said, you know, kind of quizzically, what kind of job did I have? Uh, I was a slave from day one, you know,
Yeah.
all day, every day, you know, and it wasn't a question of what kind of job I had. And so just that thought is,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's hard to wrap your head around that.
Mhm.
It just is.
Mhm.
But I'm old enough to remember sharecroppers and seeing people in the field working
Mhm.
and not accumulating any wealth and indeed being in debt to the people they were growing crops for. Just slavery
Sure.
extended,
So, so,
uneducated. God.
so, Brother Troy, last few minutes here. How do we get in front of? How can we get in front of the AI, the technology curve? How do we use this to both protect and grow our presence on the planet?
Yeah, that's going to be our generational challenge. I don't know. I think, but what I do know is that we have to become more informed about um, its capability and its powers. But in terms of how we deal with it, that's perhaps not even unknowable. I could never have predicted when I first started building websites. There was no such thing as Google. There was no such, my website actually predates Amazon. Um, I didn't know anything about. There was no social media. People were happy to create their own presence and their own websites. And what it evolved to 25 years later was unimaginable. AI was unimaginable. The
Mhm.
impact of it is is unimaginable. Any tactic that you try to deploy today will be obsolete next year.
Hmm.
It's you know this is barely a year old. I mean, I started using AI just over a year ago,
Mhm.
and I use it every day now.
Mhm.
But again, that's perhaps one of the reasons why I can see its potential, and at least short-sighted potential. I can't even if it scales up and general AI. Just I again, I don't know other than to learn as much as possible learn as much as possible as you can about this, and try to stay ahead of the curve and utilizing it. Personally, how can I incorporate AI in what I do? How can I react to the emergence of AI across the internet? And how do I maintain a viable business in that environment? It'll, it's always been a struggle, but in an AI environment, it's going to be more difficult than ever before because it's just improving so quickly. It's, and people talk about the printing press being the biggest thing.
No, this
This,
was it.
as long as there's electricity
Mhm.
and we have power, AI is going to be
Mhm.
a thing that we have to reckon with. And Black folks, they say when America catch a cold, we catch pneumonia.
Mhm.
We will be we can't, my thing is we can't be the group that uses it the least, is adversely impacted the most, and benefit financially the least. We have to figure this out. And we can't do it alone. Like I can't do this, you know, by myself. We have to work together somehow. And that's hard to do, because our culture is about independence, rugged individualism, winner take all. You know, the
If you
structures
if
don't
you lose, don't ask no questions. Why?
yeah.
Superfly, right? That's the
Oh,
culture.
that's the
Listen,
yeah.
I think we're out of time. We are out of time, but this has been a wonderful conversation. I think what you said was the mic drop, Brother Troy Johnson. And so good to talk to you again. Let's do this as often as you have the energy and time to do it. I think it's an important conversation. I'll be posting it momentarily over at the Narrative Wealth website and Nubia. I think I told you about that. I'm wearing the Nubia wear for an alternative space that is created by Black people and by African people globally. So we can do that, and we have to do things like that. Are you familiar with that? I think I told you about it, right?
Yeah, you did, but I need to really do something to help promote that as well.
I think you should. I think you've got some gifts and some skills that I think have a place in there, and there are people that are like-minded that see what you see and feel, I think, much of what you feel. And the question is, as you just said, we got to figure out how to do this together.
Okay.
Well, Troy, thank you so much, brother. And hang on for a second. I'll talk to you after we go off the air. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.